I was about 10 years old, my mom dated a man for some time. Back then, everything seemed completely normal. He was kind, and he had a daughter who was near my age, so we often spent time together. We spent weekends at his house and did things together like a family. Then eventually it just ended. Right after it ended, I noticed a distinct change in my mom's behavior. Anytime we left the house, whether we were walking into a grocery store, heading to school, or just walking to the car, she was constantly looking over her shoulder. She would scan the parking lot, look around corners, and check our surroundings before we moved. This made me incredibly anxious, so I started doing it too. Every single time we went anywhere, both of us were looking around, making sure the coast was clear. The hardest part was that I didn't even know who or what I was looking for, just that we had to keep watching. Before this started, something happened that I didn't fully understand at the time. One day, my mom, my aunt, and I went out to the roller rink. We spent hours enjoying our time, completely unaware of anything wrong. But when we finally walked out to the parking lot and got to the car, he was just standing right there waiting for us. Looking back at it now, it was terrifying, because the only way he could have possibly known we were there was if he had been watching and following us the entire time. He confronted my mom, and it turned into a loud, intense verbal argument between him, my mom, and my aunt, before he finally got back in his car and left. Being only 10, I didn't know what it meant at the time, but she must have already broken up with him before that day. Not long after that skating rink incident, being wary of our surroundings proved to be completely justified. We came home from school one afternoon. It was a regular weekday, and everything looked totally normal when we unlocked the front door and walked in. But as we stood in the front area, we heard a distinct noise coming from the back of the house, right toward my mom's bedroom. A second later, her ex casually walked out of her bedroom door and into the hallway. The shock of seeing him inside our house was immediate. My mom instantly went into protective mode and sent me straight to my bedroom. From behind my closed door, I listened to the confrontation. I heard her loudly demand what he was doing there and how he even got inside. His voice was completely flat and casual when he replied, "I had copies made of your keys." He said it like it was a completely normal thing to do. My mom called the police right away, but he managed to leave the property before they arrived. After the police left, she finally sat me down and explained the situation. She told me that she had broken up with him and completely stopped answering his phone calls. The fear from that day stayed with us, but eventually we moved away to a completely different area. Years passed by, we hadn't seen or heard from him, and we finally stopped looking over our shoulders. We genuinely thought he was out of our lives for good. Then came the afternoon we pulled into the driveway of our new house. My mom put the car in park and pressed the garage door opener on the visor. As the heavy garage door slowly rolled upward, the light hit the inside, and our hearts stopped. He was just standing there, right in the middle of our garage, waiting for us. It turned out he had actually broken into the garage through a side door. It didn't make any sense. There was absolutely no normal way for him to know our new address. We hadn't given it to anyone connected to him. The only way he could have known where we lived was if he had been actively stalking us, following us home from work or school, and figuring out our daily patterns. And now, he was ominously standing there. Who knows how long he was there waiting for us? Again, my mom's immediate reaction was to get me away from him. She sent me straight into the house to my room. From inside, I could hear her going off on him out in the garage. She was using a ton of expletives, yelling and telling him to get out of our house and away from our family. Looking back at it now, sending a child inside a house alone when a stalker is on the property probably wasn't the safest move, but she was reacting on pure adrenaline. I honestly can't remember if she called the police that second time or how he eventually left. The final piece of the story didn't happen until years later when I was an adult. By pure coincidence, I ended up reconnecting and hanging out with his daughter, the same girl who had been close to my age when our parents were dating. Naturally, she must have mentioned to her father that she ran into me and that we were spending time together. Because of that, she felt like she had to pull me aside and tell me something about him. She confessed that even after all these years, her dad is still completely obsessed. She told me he is constantly bugging her, trying to get her to track down my mom's current phone number for him. Fortunately, she understands that something is seriously off with her father, so she completely refuses to entertain his demands. Looking back at all of this now with adult eyes, it's incredibly creepy to realize how long that obsession lasted, and how close he was watching us without us ever knowing. I never really thought Facebook friend requests were anything worth paying attention to. Most of my account at that point was just old classmates I barely talked to anymore, and people I'd added years ago without much reason. This was a few years after I moved about 2 hours away from where I grew up. I didn't really know many people in the new city yet, so Facebook was still one of the main ways I kept up with friends back home. One night I got a friend request from someone named Jordan. I didn't recognize the name at first, but the profile had a lot of mutual friends from my hometown. Enough that I figured I was just forgetting who she was. The account looked normal: old photos, posts going back years, comments from different people. Nothing about it really stood out. I accepted it. A couple days later, Jordan sent a message saying she thought there was a chance we had crossed paths through mutual friends at some point, and asked how things were going. I replied normally. It didn't feel strange at the time. After that, she would react to posts here and there, comment occasionally. It was never anything that stood out on its own. What I noticed more than anything was how quickly she seemed to see things. I'd post something and she'd usually react within minutes. I just assumed she was on her phone a lot. The first moment I actually remember thinking about it was after I posted a picture of my dog. She'd been sick earlier that year, but I hadn't really talked about it publicly. Jordan asked if she was doing better. That caught me off guard because I didn't remember ever mentioning it directly. I went back later and found it buried in a comment on someone else's post. It wasn't something I'd ever really expected anyone to notice. A few days later, she asked about my mom's surgery. Same kind of thing. Not something I had posted about, just something mentioned briefly in passing under a different thread months earlier. That was when I started paying more attention to her. I actually went back and looked for those old comments after that, just to see how easy they were to find. It was harder than I expected. I'm not even sure I would have found them again if I wasn't specifically looking for them. Then I got a text message. That part didn't make sense because I never gave Jordan my number. The message asked if I was upset and why I hadn't been responding. When I asked how she got my number, she said it came from a mutual friend. When I asked which friend, she didn't really answer. That was when I blocked her on Facebook and on my phone. I figured that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A few days later, another account appeared. No profile picture, no history, but the message sounded the same, asking why she had been blocked. I blocked that one too. After a short gap, it happened again with a different account. At that point, it started to feel less like random messages and more like something that wasn't going to stop, even if I didn't really know how to explain that to anyone else. Around then, my sister messaged me asking if I knew someone named Jordan. She said a friend request had been sent to her, followed by a message asking why I was mad at her. A coworker mentioned something similar not long after, just a message asking how they knew me or whether we worked together. None of it was aggressive, which made it harder to describe. If it had been, I think it would have been easier to take seriously immediately. I went back through Jordan's profile trying to figure out what I was missing. The more I looked, the less sense it made. Even the mutual friends didn't really help. When I asked a couple of them later, most of them didn't actually know her. They just assumed she was connected to someone else in the group. That was the part that stuck with me later. She had all these connections, but nobody could really place her. What also stood out to me was that she never really asked me much about my life. It was always her bringing things up that she already seemed to know. Eventually, I deactivated Facebook because I couldn't really deal with seeing it anymore. I remember thinking it might have just ended there. Then I moved apartments. I didn't post about it. Only a few people even knew the address. A couple months later, I got an email in my spam folder with no subject line and an attachment. I almost deleted it without opening it. It was a photo of the front of my apartment building taken from across the street. My car was in the frame, so it was clearly recent. I sat with it for a while trying to figure out how any of it connected back to anything I had online. I still don't really have an answer for that. The email address itself didn't mean anything, just a random string of letters and numbers. I never responded to it. After that, I would still occasionally check old accounts out of habit, but I never saw anything else from her again, and I still don't really know who Jordan was. I work as a conductor for a passenger rail line, which will remain nameless as I'm still employed there. In my 20s, I met a woman on my train. We talked for a bit. She gave me her number, and she eventually became my girlfriend. The first 6 months went great, and there was no indication of trouble. But as time went on, a stranger emerged. I started questioning if those early months were even real, or just a performance until she knew we were locked in. Suddenly, I was looking at an entirely different person, someone with the worst traits. How did she hide every warning sign? She was irrationally jealous. I get a little protective jealousy, but she took it to a crazy level, continually manufacturing issues out of nothing. Once, on a hot day, we had friends over. Like any good host, I offered everyone a drink, and her friend Tiana accepted. The moment our guests left, my girlfriend exploded, furious that I had served another woman. In her mind, my hospitality was a betrayal to her. Things got increasingly worse. No matter where we went, she found a way to create a problem. I tried to be patient in the relationship and stick it out for a bit, hoping that somehow the person I thought I met at the beginning was actually real. But with her craziness continuing, I had no choice but to end things. Shortly after, she actually got hired at my railroad to try to be around me. She was put on the extra board, meaning she was on call to cover any vacant shifts during the week. This meant there was a very high chance we would end up working the same train. Thankfully, I didn't see her on any of my scheduled trips right away, but during that time, she made endless attempts to get back together. She refused to take no for an answer, filling my voicemail inbox to absolute capacity. I knew the best thing was to avoid all contact, because if I answered, she would never accept anything less than getting back together. And I wasn't going to get back in a bad relationship hoping in vain that her ways would improve. It was getting to be way too much, so I made the decision to shut down my phone account and got a new number. At that point, I truly thought I was free. A few days went by. I was relaxing in my bedroom when my old phone suddenly started ringing. On the screen, it displayed her number. She had somehow contacted the carrier and paid to reactivate my old line. The craziness was reaching a whole new level, and I refused to answer it. Then, things got even worse. I had just worked an overnight shift. When I returned to the employee parking lot the next morning and opened my car door, I found the entire vehicle ransacked. Every belonging from the cabin and the trunk had been taken. The company lot is secured by electronic gates. Only employees have access. Without even having to think, I knew exactly who did it. The worst part was that the only way to get my stuff back was to contact her. I reluctantly reached out to her and said, "I can't believe this. Why would you take all my things?" She explained that it was the only way to get me to talk to her. Now I was forced to see her just to get my things back. When we met up, she was completely focused on trying to talk and tried to keep me there as long as possible. But I just needed to grab my things and get out of there. I made sure to always keep my car doors locked after that. A short time later, I reported for duty on a short day trip assignment. When I stepped on board, there she was. I always keep things strictly professional, so we exchanged a brief hello, and I was honestly surprised I was able to get away with just that. I made sure to stay busy to limit any further interaction. Once I finished working the passenger cars, I walked up to the leading cab car to check in with my engineer Tom, who was operating the train from the control compartment. He said something to the effect of, "It's cool you and your girlfriend are able to work together today." I looked at him and was like, "What? She hasn't been my girlfriend for a long while." Tom looked at me and said, "She is going around telling everybody at work that you are together." A later trip was an overnight run, and there she was again, assigned to my train. I kept my distance the best I could. When we arrived at our final station, our crew was transported to a hotel to lay over overnight before our train went out the next morning. When our transport arrived, I signed in at the front desk, got my key card, and went straight to my hotel room. As I was sitting on my bed, the hotel room phone started ringing. I stared at it, thinking, oh great, here we go again. I decided to head out and walk up the street to a local restaurant just to get away. This was getting completely out of hand. I enjoyed the peace of being away from it all for a while. It got late, so I returned to my hotel room. As I got comfortable and laid down, I heard a sharp knocking at my door. I wish I could say that was the last I had heard from her, but it took months before she finally left me alone. She eventually ended up quitting the railroad altogether, telling a coworker she just couldn't handle seeing me with someone else.